Hello and welcome back to Web Design for Small Business. In this video, part 10, Bootstrap Modals, we're going to be talking about how to create a modal pop-up for our login form. So to begin, we're going to go to our NetBeans and we're going to go into our index.php file and go down to just before the end body tag. And we're going to create a new div. Alright, and this div we're going to give the ID attribute, and we need to make it the same as what we're calling here. So whatever this href attribute is, if you kept it the same as what I have, it would be login box using camel caps. Note that the ID does not have the hashtag. The hashtag indicates that it is an internal link looking for the something with an ID with login box. There we go. Okay. Now we're going to give it a class, and this class is going to be modal and then space, and we're going to give it another class, fade. Adding the fade will make it fade to black in and out, so it has more of an animated effect to it. Then we're going to give it a role attribute, and the role is going to be dialog. Okay, then we're going to create another div underneath this one. And this div is going to have a class which is modal hyphen dialog. And we're going to create another div underneath this one, and it will also have a class and it is modal content, modal hyphen content. Okay. Now we're going to create another div. And this one is going to have a class of modal header, modal hyphen header. And finally, we are going to add a button. And our button type is going to be button. Our class is going to be close. And it's going to have another attribute, data dismiss, which is equal to modal. And then in here, we're going to create an icon tag, and our icon class fast times. And if you are familiar with math, you know that the times symbol is an X. So if you can't guess just by reading this what this does, this is a button that will appear in the header, so in the top section of our modal, that when you click on it, it will close the window. So it gets rid of the modal. That's what the data dismiss means. So now we have a way to open the window by clicking on the login, and a way to close it by clicking on this X. Okay. Now, under that, we're going to create the title for our header. So we're going to use a header class. Going to use, let's go with H3. And the class is going to be modal title. We're going to call it login. That. Then under this one, we're going to create another div. So that was our modal header. Now we're going to create our modal body. Okay. So in our modal body, this is where we will actually have our login form. But for now, I will just give it a small placeholder. And just save that. And now we're going to go and test that. Oh, before we do that, we want to remove the disabled from that. Okay, now we'll go and test it. So refresh. Notice this is no longer grayed out. When I hover the mouse over it, it turns, looks like gray, the color of our text. I believe I want that to be green. Here, this, because there are other layers after the navigation class, like anything that directly applies to the anchor tag. So close that, refresh, and now when I hover over, it is green. And the reason why I didn't do it before was because if you have disabled, then it will still turn green when you hover over it, and I didn't like that, so that's why I had kept that off before. But we can actually fix that. So we're going to go in here and dot navigation, or actually dot disabled a hover a dot disabled hover color pound. I believe it's 9. I forgot the colon. Important semicolon. Save that out. Now, because this line comes after this line, if it is disabled, this will overwrite this. save that, refresh. So this stays, but when I go over these ones, they stay gray. Yeah. Okay, so now to see what we actually did, click on the login form, and boom, we have a box. It says login. It has a little X. That X is not where we want it to be though. That is all the way over left. We want it to be all the way over right. So how do we fix that? We go in here and we can put it either above or below all of these navigation ones. Now normally I keep everything kind of spaced out with the line between, but because these were all navigation ones, I kept them the same. This one, however, isn't navigation, so I should actually remove that and put it below. So we created a class for that, if you didn't remember. The button has a class of close. So there is a reason we did that, because we need to create that. And I'm also going to make it bold. Boom. And now it's in that corner. However, I'm not liking the fact that it has this kind of button background behind it. So I think I'm going to work a little bit with that as well. So because I'm going to have more than just a couple things, I'm going to break this out onto its own lines. So I'm going to make the background color transparent, and I'm going to make the border none. Save those two things, refresh, click on it again, and now you see it doesn't have the border, it doesn't have a background, it's just the symbol, but it's still a functional button. When you click it, it closes. Now you notice that it will still have a blue border around it when I click and hold the mouse button down. That is actually set by the browser. You can try to change it, but it is a pain in the butt and it's not guaranteed to work because it's something that's individual for each browser. And it is super annoying to have to work around. So for the most part, I just give up on those things. Like I said, there is a way to fix it, but half the time it's just not worth it. Now, one thing I do want to do is I want to make that bigger. And I think I also want to make it proportional. So I'm going to see what that does. Yeah, so that makes it pretty big. Might almost be too big. Yeah. Let's see what it looks like when we shrink it down. See, now I feel that's too small, whereas that's too big. So what I think I'm going to do is not have it scale proportionally and just have it a set pixel size. So I remember having the rest of our icons at 20 pixels from back here. So I'm going to try it at that to start. See if I like that. And I actually do. I think that's a pretty decent size for it. Okay. Now, when we click on it, that even made it a nice kind of more box shape. But I think I will give it a little bit more padding. So I'm also going to add padding to make that just a little bit more uniform. And go with 6 pixels. Start with that and see how that works for me. A lot of this is kind of guesswork and trial and error. Okay, it worked on the, looks like it worked vertically but not horizontally. So there might be something else that's affecting that. If I make it important, I'll see if that will properly override it, or if I need to look at affecting that change somewhere else. Now, if when you inspect this and you notice that our I here, our I class, looks completely different from what it used to be, and you're like, what is all this? Well, this is that little JavaScript file for our icon set from Font Awesome. This is what it actually does. So after you enter that, it has a JavaScript code that will look for it, find it, and then change it to the code that it needs to be to actually be able to display that icon. And this is all that code. If you're wondering what all these numbers are, those are literal coordinates to draw the icon. That's what an SVG is. It's a scalable vector graphic. So these are vectors, or literal points, that have connected lines that then create a shape. And that path is a series of numbers. And it uses that and actually does the math within the engine and creates our image. Which is why we didn't actually have to download any physical icons or anything. It was all just script, because that script contained all these coordinates for all the different icons. So it's with the button. It may have to do with our actual icon, so I'm going to try adjusting one thing with our icon. And where's our close icon in the login box here? Right here. So I'm going to go file.fw and see if that changes anything for us. And there we go. Now it's kind of nice and fat and given a little bit more space and breathing room. So the actual clickable area now becomes bigger on that. I always like to have really big buttons for everything because I have fat fingers. So when my fat fingers are trying to do stuff on cell phones, if the buttons are tiny, I end up clicking the wrong one all the time. So I like my buttons to be spaced out and be actually very large. So that helps people like me. Okay, so that's awesome. That works really well. We may want it to be a different color or to have kind of a hover quality to it. So with that one, I think we'll keep it that color, but when we hover over it, I think I want it to turn red, because red is always kind of synonymous with cancel. So we go back into our class and we just need to give this a dot close hover, and this one we're just going to adjust the color, and we're going to make that our red. And refresh that and see if that works. Yeah, so when we hover over it now, it changes to red. Perfect. Now you might want to also just change it to the green if we're making everything, when it's a button you hover over it, it's green, just to keep it the same throughout. Typically with buttons, I like to color code them so that anything that kind of moves you forward is green, anything that cancels or moves you back is red. Just that kind of red, yellow, green, like a light for driving. It's kind of ingrained in people's head. Green for go, red for stop. People understand that without having to put any extra thought into it. The other thing we want to do is we want to adjust our font sizes. So first off, we have this login. I want this to be centered, and I'm going to want this to be a little bit bigger, but that's not a big deal because that is just our regular placeholder text, and that's going to be replaced anyway. So right now we're just going to focus on this and then kind of leave it at that. Yeah. Okay. So we used H3. So if you scroll up, you remember we had an H1, but we didn't have an H2 or 3. So we will create H2, H3, and we'll do an H4 as well. Okay, so I'm going to keep the color for the first 3 as my red. I'm also going to make that bold. Now, if you are literally making them all the exact same, you could just add them on the same line and put commas, like with these. However, I am going to change them, but the color and font weight is going to be the same on all of them. Except H4, I'm actually going to make that one gray. Okay. Font family, I'm going to keep it the same there. So that's not going to change, but the font size I am going to change. Now the problem is we won't actually know what any of these do. So one thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually in this going to create a few lines. and you see what I did there. I missed the end tag, and then when it was trying to auto-create stuff, it just went haywire. So I'm just going to copy this line and paste it 4 times. And these numbers I'm going to just change along with these ones. And these ones. And doing stuff like this is actually a really good way to test different things. So now I can test 4 different font sizes all at the same time to see what each one looks like. Okay, so I'm going with 45, 30, 24, and 20. Going to refresh. We have to click login to bring that up. And you can see the different font sizes. And as we put this one at H3, it automatically adopts the header 3 size. So I think they're all a little too small. So I'm going to make them all a little bigger. I think for H2, I will keep that one at 45. This one, I think I will go for, let's try something crazy like 70. This one, I'm going to make 24. And this one, I will make let's go 42, so it's just slightly smaller than that. And I'm going to make this one italic as well, just to change it up a little bit. Okay. So I'm not liking the italic whatsoever. It actually, if you notice, the A is completely different. It almost looks like it's using a completely separate font for the italic, which I'm not a huge fan of. So I am going to convert that one back from that. As for the rest, I think this one needs to be a little bit smaller, but I do kind of like the rest. So I'm going to keep those two. This one I'm going to increase a little bit, and this one I'm going to decrease a little bit. Okay, so this one I'm going to make 36, and this one I'm going to make 28. Save those, refresh, and yeah, I kind of like that. Seems to work. The X does seem like it's a little small now for the size of this guy, but I don't mind that. See what it looks like scaled down. Yeah, I'm still happy with that. Okay, perfect. So we'll go back in here. We leave that, but we can get rid of those. Save that. All right. Refresh. Close that. Login form. Boom. So we have our basic modal. Now there's a few things. You can either click on that X, or if you click anywhere on this black, it will get rid of it as well. However, if you click anywhere inside the box, nothing happens. So modals are nice. The other thing you can do is you can actually adjust the modal size. This is the medium box, but you can get a large one or a small one. So if you want for your login box, because it's just a username and password, you can use the small one. And then if you have like a large form or something and you want it to take up wider space, you can use the large one. For the purpose of our login box though, because I like to make my text larger so that it's easier for people with poor eyesight to navigate, and then it makes buttons easier, so it works on smaller screens if things are just generally bigger and take up more space. So I'm going to keep that. And you see with Bootstrap, it automatically kind of scales down for us as we're using smaller devices. So on a phone, it would basically take up the entire screen, which is good. So we maximize our space. Alright, so that's our site for now. I will see you guys in the next video.